Town Band Banter with Doc and Dave. Every week, two longtime friends and colleagues in the world of music, David Price and Donald Doc Smith, get together to discuss the triumphs as well as the twists and turns of lifelong learning for the dedicated members of thousands of civilian community music ensembles of every shape and size. Your comments and suggestions are always welcomed through email as info@townbandbanter.com, Facebook, Town Band Banter, and Instagram, #TownBandBanter. And now for our hosts, Doc and Dave.
All right, here we go with Season 2, Episode 2, Town Band Banter with Doc
and Dave.
Hey, yes, even better this week, we have a wonderful guest. And there's a bit of a side story to all of this, because last week when I turned the camera off after doing a wonderful episode, it really was a terrific episode.
Our best one. I thought the dance routine was spectacular.
Yeah, because no one's ever going to see it, because somehow
I can't do it again.
there was a power surge or something, and I lost the whole video. So we're doing this spontaneously the second time around, but for guys our age, that's probably okay. You know, like I can't remember what I had for breakfast. So
every moment is spontaneous as our age. Yeah.
So this is Dr. Marvin Wasser, who we know through. We just finished a rehearsal with Romps. He plays in that, but he plays in a pile of other things too. And maybe we could start with that. I think that'd be a good way to start, like your beginning and then where you're at now, because you're playing so many things as a prominent but also retired pediatrician.
That's right.
From Providence. But go ahead.
Yeah, so my musical journey began in 1958, about when I was 57, when I was given a violin in third grade, and I played it for a year, and at the end of the year, I was supposed to play a duet, and the girl that I was playing with called in sick with German measles, and so I was a soloist at third grade in front of the entire school, playing some little French folk tune on violin.
Did you also diagnose the German measles, or was that...
That was before my understanding of what anything was.
Right.
And then I went all the way up to fourth grade, and I said, I don't want a violin anymore, Dad. And they, okay, we'll find you a clarinet. And they found a used clarinet, which went down from some neighbor and then to my cousin, and then he didn't want it, so I had it. And the clarinet is actually a vintage prefer, which was made in Providence, and it's a classic clarinet now, and I played that all the way through high school and college.
Yeah.
And I went and played it at Brown in the Brown Band. By the way, before I forget, the Brown Band is having its centennial celebration this weekend.
Wow.
And so I'll be playing with 200 other alumni and undergrads at the Harvard Brown football game, on the field and marching and so on.
And where Brown Man Born is also Rhode Island born. You share a fight song with what brought me here was the University of Rhode Island, and we share a fight song.
Yeah, but we changed the words.
I know. No, the word's different. Well, I'm sure it probably came from Brown.
Ever true to Brown. It's
absolutely.
Ever true is the motto. So I played all the way through college, and I also picked up oboe in high school when I was sitting in the third chair section of clarinet, and the conductor said, would you like to play something else? And I said, sure, oboe, how about oboe? Yeah,
wait a minute. How are you supposed to take that? You know, the director says, maybe you should play something else.
I was not even able to get into the first band in my 10th grade, so I was very happy in the 11th to be offered to play anything.
Right.
But,
yeah, that's good.
So then I didn't really play anything but I was musically involved. I went through medical school, and I picked up a saxophone when I was in medical school in Italy, in Bologna, Italy, and I saw a tenor sax in the window, and I just started playing it on my own, and because I'd always wanted a saxophone.
Yeah.
How did your roommates feel about that?
I played when they weren't there.
Okay, so they felt great about it.
I was out on the balcony playing Summertime. I didn't even have any sheet music, so I just played Summertime. And then it turns out I came back years later, and I wanted to trade it in for something else or get it fixed. And they said, that's not a tenor sax, that's a C melody sax.
Oh my gosh!
So I said, you can't use that anywhere.
Yeah, no,
but at least I've had some experience on that one. And I sang in a chorus in Providence the 1980s, and then I sang in a chorus in Cranston. It was an alumni chorus. It was originally from the Cranston East and Cranston West alumni, and then it was an adult chorus, and we traveled to Sydney, Australia. And
Wow.
So I sang in that chorus. But the Providence chorus, I played clarinet for them for a little bit. And then I had my daughter have clarinet lessons when she was in 7th grade, so that's around 1991, 92, and I was taking her lessons, and the teacher said, "Do you play?" And I said, "Yeah, I play saxophone and clarinet and oboe." And he said, "Oboe, they're looking for an oboist, second oboist at the Rhode Island Wind Ensemble." So I said, okay. I went over there and I played oboe for a month.
Yeah.
And then another second oboe came and he said, "Do you play anything else?" I said, "Yeah, I play saxophone." "Oh, well, we have a used Barry sax. Get on the Barry sax seat." So I played Barry sax for years and years, maybe 4 or 5 years with a used old leaky Barry sax.
They're always
Well, then I bought a new one.
Army
and
issue.
I bought a new one and it was beautiful and
Yeah, right.
it played well. Then I went to alto, and I played the alto for a long time in the Rhode Island Wind Ensemble, and then I switched back to Barry, where I was until last year, and then I switched to tenor. So I played and then I'm in a sax quartet, so I play soprano and alto and sometimes Barry. So I play all of those, and then, I continue to play oboe and flute and with a chorus that I sing now in my temple. In Cranston, I'm playing English horn and tenor sax in the Rhode Island Wind Ensemble for the upcoming concert.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Nice.
So,
Everyone
a
looks for
lot of
that.
groups. And then I'm playing in 2 big bands. One is the Romps, retired old musicians. I qualify for that, just barely, but I'm only 75.
No, that's all right. You're fine.
I retired about 3 years ago, and all of a sudden, the 2 groups I was playing in, which was a Rhode Island Wind Ensemble at night and a big band on Monday night in East Providence. And all of a sudden I retired, and this is what happens with community players. If you can play a lot of different instruments,
Right.
people say, "Do you play this?" "Yeah, okay, we need you there." "Well, let me just check my schedule."
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, I'm free that night."
When is the clarinet choir?
And
when
the
is that
clarinet
rehearsed?
choir I play in is once a month on Saturday morning at the Roberts Music, which is in West Warwick. And the clarinet choir started as about 5 or 6 people, and I played bass clarinet, and then there was a couple of clarinets, an alto clarinet, and it's now grown into about 22 clarinet players, including contrabass, contralto,
Oh, wow.
bass and horn,
Yeah.
alto sax, and there's 3 or 4 bass clarinets, and lots of B flats and 1 E flat. So
No crummy horns?
no,
Crumb horn.
Yeah.
It's the
No
crummy horn.
Oh yes.
No, that's fantastic. So give me the big picture here. You were a physician for how many
Yeah,
years?
so the big picture is I was a pediatrician since 1980, and I retired at the end of 2021. And I was playing a couple nights a week, and I was, looking at my watch and saying, I can't see that patient because I have a rehearsal. And no, you have to see the. Okay, so then I'd get to the rehearsal a little late, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where you're being a physician, a pediatrician, it's a lot of stress and tension, and so to go to a rehearsal, even though I was exhausted, it was a release. It was a wonderful change of pace, and so I did that twice a week, and then when I retired 3 years ago, I was able to play in the romps because you can't play in the romps unless you're retired,
Right.
Because it's 10 o'clock on Monday morning. Who can play 10 o'clock on Monday morning if you're
Right,
working?
exactly. Yeah.
So
There is no audition. It's just that you have to be at 10 o'clock on Monday morning rehearsal.
Well, there was, I substituted in the romps for a while, and then the lead alto player decided to leave, and then they asked me to come in, and so I've been doing that and having a great time.
Fantastic. So let's get to the heart of the issue. The reason we really wanted to have you, you're an amazing guy anyway, but the pediatrician, and now you play with all these old folks, so music with pediatrics, I'm sure you'll have some insights on that, students that you had along the way, ways that it helped them, ways in physical as well as, just cognitive ways. And then maybe we could get into the cognitive issues and oral and physical and all of those other issues for the older folks that we just dealt with for the last 2 hours in our rehearsal.
Let's unpack that question.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot
There's some
there.
unpacking.
Yeah. Do you know the Gettysburg Address along with everything else?
In fact,
Yeah.
on a side note, I recited the Gettysburg Address in costume started with my daughter's first grade class.
Wow.
And I went there, and because I had a beard with no mustache, and I put a top hat on and a tie and a bow tie, and I did that for about 30 years.
Oh, my God.
After she left the first grade,
That's why we had that question down here.
Yeah, that's why I was there.
Yeah, so that's it. But as far as a pediatrician, my feeling about music, as you could probably tell, is I love playing music, listening to it, and I encourage music, and I was encouraging it for all the years. First of all, I played the classical music 24-hour station from Boston, the WGBH, then it went to WCRB. It's out of Boston. It's an NPR classical music station. So I played that in the back of my office every day, all those 40-some years. And then the patients would hear it, and some of them would wonder what it was, and some would be moving to it a little bit. And teenagers would say, "Oh, I don't really like that." And I said, "Well, just imagine that it's the soundtrack of a movie, and you picture a movie, and if it's exciting, some action, or if it's slow, it's sad, or a love scene, or whatever." And then they started to understand this classical music. And then I'd ask them, some I would say, how are you playing? Do you get involved in music in school? And some would say yes, and some I would say I encourage them to try to consider it, whether if they were elementary school or they were already in high school. But the point is that I was encouraging music, whether listening or participating all the time. In fact, I chaperoned for my daughters, one after the other, my daughter's high school band at Cranston High School West, and when they went on trips, they went on trips every other year. So I went on the chaperoned as a doctor. Chaperone.
Those are the best ones to have.
Yeah. So when I asked the band director, and I said, "You interested in a chaperone? You're a pediatrician, right?" "Yeah, absolutely. We'll pay your way," and so on. And,
Right.
Yeah. So I was doing that, and I continued that for about 30 years until maybe the last couple of years. So I enjoyed that, and so I got to know some of the kids, and we would encourage it. And as far as the benefits, of course are physical and emotional, psychological, and respiratory, cardiac, everything about playing, whether it's strings or winds. And so it's a wonderful thing, and they all get to appreciate it. And then you compare that to adults, where the band director of the high school would always, at concerts, would always tell the parents that, you see the people up on the stage here, they're the best kids in the whole school.
Right.
He was biased, but
For the most part, they were.
but music players are not getting into trouble, and they're probably mostly not smoking, and so it's a wonderful thing, a great influence.
I started noting it when I was at South Kingstown High School. The last 3 years that I was there, the valedictorian and salutatorian, right? 5 out of 6 of those people were actively performing in music ensembles.
Yeah, and I can say as a high school student, with the exception of me, the other kids that were like, the valedictorian, all those kids were involved with music,
Right.
in some way, or the arts in some way,
As well
shape,
as
or
other
form.
things.
Yeah, as well as other things, but it does go hand in hand. Very
Well,
nice.
it's almost like if you think about the influence of parents, if parents played, or if they really are at least very interested and engaged in their children, they encourage from the early age participation in everything, and including music. And the music continues, and music and studies are correlated. At the very earliest age, have been some studies about listening to Mozart and babies learning ability to formulate math problems and so on as they get older. But just in general, the good students are going to also want to be engaged in some activities, not just hanging out. And
Sure.
not to disparage that, but it just works out that way. And then in the concerts in my Rhode Island Wind Ensemble, for example, the conductor, sometimes we play with high schools, and we play combined, separately, but combined at some point in the concert.
Yeah.
And the conductor says to the audience, the parents' audience and the adults in general, look at the age range of all these people on the stage. And then he has people stand up. Those were born in the 2000s, and then a lot of people stand up. And then the 1990s and 80s and 70s, it keeps going, and we're still sitting there.
Waiting.
And the 60s, no, still not standing up. And the 50s, not quite. No, they haven't. And he said, and everybody else.
Everybody else.
The last 5 people stand up.
And they were born in the 1800s.
Yeah,
so
something like that. Yeah. And, but his point, of course, is you can play music all the days of your life, and from the earliest time. And if you continue with it, or if you stop and then you pick it back up, you can play in community groups. You don't have to go to conservatories. You don't have to be a professional musician.
Right.
You pick it up and you love it, and that's what I do. I chose to be a pediatrician, or actually a physician, since I was about 10. I knew that I was going to be in the field of medicine, but I was playing music all the time, and it was kind of like a second dream I've had in the back of my head. I love those bands. I'm listening to those bands. I'm going to orchestras, and I wish I could play in an orchestra, and now I'm doing it. So now that, as an adult, so we encourage the kids to get the benefits not only of physical and mental, but long term. As they say, you're not going to play football when you're 50 or 60,
sure.
et cetera. So
My sister told me when she was in medical school that everyone had some sort of an outlet. Everyone had. So some guys were weightlifters, and some were runners, and some were did bikes, and some did music, of course, too. Anything that's going to really distract you needs to be something that requires a lot of focus. And that's why if you're just like killing time and not thinking about anything, your mind tends to stay on what's been troubling you. So music's a good challenge.
That's true.
Well, one last thought about the physicians and music. In fact, I've been in a group in Providence called the Providence Medical Orchestra, which is affiliated with the Brown University Medical School. And the majority of the players are physicians, nurses, medical students, pre-med, undergrads, and retired physicians. And, it's a group of about 50, and there may be 2 or 3 non-medically related people. And they're all good players,
Right.
So, yeah. And they've all been playing since grade school.
And I ran the same thing with engineers at Penn State University, that the engineers would audition for our better groups at the symphony orchestra, and they would knock the music majors out because they were just better at everything, not just one thing. If the music majors were just buried in a practice room all day, these folks were trying to pass physics exams and everything else. So it's great. So now let's get to, now we're all senior citizens, and we're trying to do this music thing, and rhythm ends up coming into play, as well as other things. So cognitive, the visual, the physical with arthritis now, and all of that. See if you could unpack all of that.
We have, as I was saying, you can play music, perform at a decent level, all the way until you're just physically completely unable. And in fact, some of the things that we do in music are using our brains, using our physical, our lungs, our heart, our soul. And, if you have whatever your life is, the usual mundane things you do all day, the difference that happens when you come to the music rehearsal, or especially when you're in a concert, is just a complete change in your attitude, and it's just a wonderful thing. If you have a little arthritis, it may be that if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't move it, you lose it. So for people who use all their 10 fingers to play instruments, or 3 fingers, but whatever, you're moving. And of course, if you're sitting around watching TV all the time and not exercising, if you come and you're blowing horns, or it's just great for the respiratory and the cardiac and again, like I said, the soul and the spirit, and it really lifts your spirit and changes everything.
Right. One of the things I've noticed is that I've been a lifelong percussionist, and it's a lot like dancing. If you're sitting down on a kit and your legs and your hands they're moving, right? It's a lot like that, and there's a lot of cardio with that. Unfortunately, it takes its toll on your ears, but I've noticed that I started a few years ago playing the French horn. And
Yes, we heard about
I get yes, you heard about that. Yes, I know it's a little bit famous now, but I play in the Jamestown group, and Doc is very forgiving with my playing. He's very forgiving. But one thing I do notice at the end of rehearsal, I feel refreshed, oxygenated, everything, because you've got to really breathe and work that thing,
Yes.
Even more so recently, because Sal gave you a high five after, what was it, Phantom of the Opera or something? There was something you
one little
nailed on.
spot.
Yeah, there was this one little spot,
lucked
and
out.
you absolutely nailed it, and it's like
Right.
Sal jumped up from his drum set and gave you a high five, and then you told me about it in the middle of golf.
Well, as a matter of fact, so drummers use their whole body, but
That's correct.
and they're breathing just to stay upright. But,
Right, that's
but
right.
when you play a wind, if this is the first time you've really experienced playing a wind,
Right.
It's a whole different thing.
Well, playing it in particular, French horn takes a fair amount of air.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the whole, using the whole apparatus for breathing and getting that I was taught in school.
Right.
This is what you do,
Well, you
But
think
then now
about-
I experience it, and
You think about runners who talk about endorphins and and the runner's high. Well, you come in and you play a wind instrument or a string or playing music anyway, using your body and your breathing. I would leave my office and feel pretty tired and
Yes.
maybe a little stressed out, and I'd get to rehearsal and I said, I don't know if I could play. I don't have any energy left. And we'd warm up and start playing, and all of a sudden I start to get more and more energy. You get more opposite to what you'd think. You get more energy. And by the time the rehearsal was over, I said, I'm ready to play some more. And it's a great thing. Lifting your physical and your
absolutely,
spiritual.
absolutely, yeah.
My Tuesdays used to be like that. When I started doing the Jamestown Community Band, I was still working, so I teach all day long. And then I had several lessons backing up right to Jamestown Community Band. And I'd walk out of that with more energy than I started the day or any time during the day. So, yeah, that's always been the case for me.
Sure.
And the other one, some people compare it to athletics, but with athletics, for you to be joyous and celebrate, someone else has to lose. And in music, no one has to lose. And you get the same feelings. It's actually exactly what we could do a whole episode on that. I would love to do that sometime because I've led bands at national championship games where we've won, where we've lost, and it was the same feeling, like as when I get off the stage.
Thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Absolutely.
But there's no agony when you're playing music and you're entertaining the audience and you're entertaining yourself and your colleagues. It's a wonderful feeling.
Well, as a beginner French horn, there's a fair amount of agony involved, but
For
it's all right.
for you
It's
or
like-
for the
More
people
for
around you?
everyone else around you.
both,
Yeah.
both, as a matter of fact,
Make sure you keep that right hand stuffed into the horn.
as far in as I can.
There are those people in the clarinet section that practice more so they can move over a couple seats away from you. No, this isn't true. The party
That's
is
right.
closer to the principal clarinet, so that's it. Let's dig just a little bit deeper into the aural too, because that's something that even though the equipment has gotten so much better with assisting hearing.
There's so many people in several of the groups I'm in, the older adults, I'm included, but I don't, that have hearing aids, and I don't have them yet. But my wife insists that I should have them, but
I do, but I can't use them when I'm playing drums.
you
so
can't.
that's
No,
okay.
it'd be terrible. Yeah.
And
But,
the only thing I can't hear is my wife, so she.
Selective. We'd always, in pediatrics, we always call that selective hearing.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
It's a syndrome.
Yeah.
Was afflicted with that after saying the words "I do."
Yeah.
It's amazing how many things happen right at that moment.
Just like
yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah.
We're off the subject, I think.
Sorry, Doc.
But before I forget, one of the other things I encouraged when I encouraged my students and my patients in music, some of them would go through college and they'd invite me to their senior recital. And I've been to a few at University of Rhode Island and Providence College. And
Nice.
it was wonderful. And they were so appreciative that I would come. But I thought it was great to be there.
Oh, yeah.
So that was another thing. But as far as the oral, AURAL
Right.
version of what we're talking about, you need to listen to things, and you have to hear, and you have to be in rhythm and follow the conductor. Or if there's no conductor, you're just your senses are aroused a little greater to a greater degree. And when you need, you can turn your hearing aids up.
Right. So that's correctable. Visual has become a little bit better with people with multiple lights.
Yes. Many people have very bright stand lights, and so in other words, some of these slight defects can be overcome with what we can do now with the hearing aids and the lights but unfortunately sometimes the arthritis of the fingers. Sometimes I know some people who their fingers are getting so crooked that they had to stop because they couldn't, the fingers couldn't land on the openings.
Yeah. So one last thing, you knew I was driving towards something here, and we're back to the cognitive. And every once in a while we end up with folks, and it happens in this band too, that people just for a while are just out of the rhythm, they don't know where they are. They're lost in the music, and then sometimes not aware that they're lost for a period of time, not just like a measure or so, or like playing a wrong note. So ways to get, I don't know that there's no hearing aid for that. Do you have any suggestions for folks that are struggling with that?
Well, of course, at home, practicing with a
metronome.
Right. Thank you. So that you could practice really just counting, you tapping your foot very discreetly, and then listening. Listening is a very important part of being part of an ensemble. So, and then maybe sometimes you have sectionals with the various groups so you break down where the problem is. But, and then even individual, if this one person needs an individual assist. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing, I suppose, is if you get lost, just drop out and come back in when you think you know where you are.
When in doubt, lay out. Right, one of the first lessons that I learned along the way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a couple questions that we like to ask all of our guests. So one was, what was your most memorable experience with the community music ensemble?
There were a couple when you asked me to think about that, and the one that comes to mind is I was playing with the Fall River Symphony Orchestra, Fall River, Massachusetts, and I was invited in to play bass clarinet. And so I played for a few years, and then the conductor knew that I played saxophone. So he said, I have a piece that we're going to play, and I'd like you to play the alto saxophone part. I said, oh, okay. So I figured it was just some background. And he gave me the piece, and the piece was called La Création du Monde, The Creation of the World, by Darius Milhaud. And so I sat in the back in the first rehearsal with my alto sax. I was trying to be discreet and out of the way. And he said, oh, no, come up front, right in front of me. He said, what? Well, you're going to be the viola of a string quartet. Oh, two violins to my right, cello to my left, and I'm the viola/alto sax solo.
So instead of bowings, you had blowings.
I had
blowings.
Very good, yeah. So, and it worked out. So that was a thrill and a half to be able to do that.
And you had only played jazz for the most part on saxophone, right? But you played, and the advantage you played legit on, clarinet and other instruments.
I was playing in this group for several years as a bass clarinet, which is absolutely classical music.
Sure.
We were playing. Sure. I was playing a lot of straight music in the Rhode Island Wind Ensemble with my saxophone. So I was ready for that. It was,
It's rare, because the saxophones you bring in usually have only played jazz. That was their specialty. Yeah. And to sit in a legit is very difficult for them. They're not used to how that's supposed to sound. It's a very small field.
For what it's worth, saxophone, if you start in school, you got to start with clarinet, because there's so many saxophone players now, and you ask them if they can play clarinet, and they say no, and so there's very few that can double on sax and clarinet. But the other one was I was in a chorus in Cranston, I mentioned, back in the 1990s, and so a festival came along that the conductor was familiar with, and it happened to be in Sydney, Australia. Mm. So there we are, we're on the flight, and we go to Fiji, and then we go to Sydney, and the next thing I know, I'm on the stage at the Sydney Opera House.
Wow.
So we sang some Disney songs and whatever, but I met some people from Taiwan, and one of the other things was this, I just remembered, we sang as a 300-voice chorus at that concert, Chichester Psalms by Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah, right.
And, of course, it's all in Hebrew. And
so not just Disney songs.
As our small little individual group, we sang Disney, but the big group, the 300, which was combined with choruses from Germany and Taiwan and other European countries and so on. So the conductor was looking. He said, "Well, we have the soloist. It's a boy soloist, and he needs some help on the Hebrew." And so my conductor said, "Oh, Marvin speaks Hebrew. He reads and speaks Hebrew." So I was helping not only the boy separately, but I was helping some of the other countries. So the conductor recognized that I could speak Hebrew, and he offered my services to the several other choruses that had no idea what was going on. It was all phonetic, and so I read the entire thing to this group of maybe 200. And then afterwards, when we all broke up for lunch, I went with the boy soloist, pre-pubertal, so he's singing sort of a soprano voice. And he had a horrendous Australian accent on the Hebrew, so I cleaned it up a little bit, and they thanked me very much for that. So that was part of that. And what else do I have?
That's actually a fascinating story.
And the other one was what we're going to be doing soon, which we did last year with the romps, is playing at the Women's Adult Correctional Institution.
Right. Yeah, that's coming up.
So we had that experience, and we're going to have it again. And they let us out so that we can go back in. I think it's 3 to 5, or no, is it 5 to 10? No.
3 to 5.
No.
It's 1 to 3. 1 to 3, depending on the offense.
1 to 3, right.
Yeah, one of the questions is, how was a big challenge with a community music ensemble, and how was it overcome? One of the things Doc and I have talked a lot about is that, running these groups, the challenges that we have. What music do you pick? How do you choose, who plays what chair? And dealing with some of the issues of young players and old players, and how do you deal with that? So I'm just throwing this out. How was a big challenge with a community music ensemble, and how was it overcome? Personally, I don't know if you can add something with that.
Well, yeah, thinking about placement, it's usually, with the big bands, usually people get invited in because they know, and this is what it is about community musicians. If you play one group, all of a sudden there's networking, and they how about, do you have, it's Tuesday free, can you play in this group, and so on. So you're recognized as somebody who's competent, and you just come in, and whatever chair is open, you fill it. When it comes to larger ensembles, or like wind orchestras, wind ensembles, it's up to the conductor. There's always a conductor, and they decide. Sometimes they even audition, and they put you in the place that they want you to be.
Right.
But other challenges, which we talked about in our first take of this podcast, were in community groups, finding rehearsal space. You have to be somebody. You have to know somebody. In Rhode Island, you have to know a guy has the key to and the air conditioning and the heat controls, and it often is a church. In fact, I think this is one of 2 churches that I play at. No, 3. I play at another one. So a lot of times churches have big space, and so that's it. So, but there's also rental fees. So there's the groups have to pay some rent often. It's not to help whatever facility is offering the space. So you have to fundraise. You have to charge for tickets, sometimes for your concerts. Sometimes the players have to donate just to get, keep it going. And
Jamestown has a really interesting Jamestown Community Band. When I came in, I said, what's the funding mechanism? And they said, well, we start running low on funds. We put an article in the paper, and people donate money.
Yeah, and
they always do.
Once every couple years. I had never heard of anything like that, but it works fine. So we're not going to change it.
Well, the Lafayette Band, which is a band in North Kingstown, Rhode Island, gets some funding from the city, from the town.
But Jamestown does too.
Yeah, Westerly does.
So a lot of community, if they're affiliated and they identify with the town that they're playing in, will get some funds through and the Rhode Island Wind Ensemble, which is a state group, gets some funding from RISCA.
A grant.
Yeah.
They get is it a continuing grant?
It's a grant. Apply every year.
Right.
Yeah. So
I was on one of those committees.
So the other challenge is sometimes there's openings in a group, and you can't find somebody to fill that spot. The French horns are very valuable players. So, you know.
No, real French hornets.
Oh, you'll be a real one pretty soon.
Someday when I grow up.
That was my son's free ride through NYU.
Yeah.
They needed a world-class horn player, and he happened to be there at that time.
So sometimes, you know, you have to shop around and see if you can get it, or you get a sub just for the concert.
Sure. Right. So what do you see for the future of community ensembles? You're in so many of them.
Well, I think it's a bright future because I see young people playing. I have seen young people playing in all my patients that we talked about. So I know that there's a constant flow of musicians coming up and growing up. And even in the groups that I've been playing in, there are people who will leave, and often the seat is filled within a day or a week. And so I think that there's always, and as far as the enthusiasm of the audiences, depending on who you're playing for, but they appreciate it so much that you're always going to have an audience to encourage you to continue playing. So I think it's good.
Missing it during COVID. There were all the hard parts of that, you know, the supply of younger players because some programs were struggling and all that. But the audience, it seems like everyone's appreciating it a little bit more when you lose something, you know, and get it back. There seems to be more enthusiasm.
With one of the big band, my other big band, I'm the announcer with the other big band, and I think it was probably 2021 or maybe 2022 when we finally got back to live music. And I said, so do you like having live music back? And I couldn't stop them from applauding. I mean, we had to say, okay, enough. Yeah, I get it. You appreciate it for sure. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you coming and doing this again.
Yeah.
I think it was better.
I hope it's recorded this time.
I hope so.
No one will ever know whether it was better or worse than the last one, but it was very similar, and it was great. Thank you so much for your double time for doing that. Dr. Marvin Wasser was a fantastic guest, and we're ready to sign off, I think. Just remember to follow us.
Yeah.
We're on YouTube now. We're also the video is also available on Spotify. And then, of course, all the podcast things. So we'll look forward to make sure you tell your friends, share it, and we'll keep growing this. In the meantime,
Wasser, thank you very much, sir.
We always end with, just keep on playing.
Yeah. Hey, you remembered it. Your cognitive skills are still there.
I'm about a microsecond behind.